Hello everyone, my name is Mitchell Sellen. I'm a resident of Salt Lake County, Utah. I've lived in or around Salt Lake County since 1995, off and on. I'm here to share a timeline with you of the last 10 years of child abuse and neglect and crimes that have gone unaccounted for, unaccountable, so that in the event that something should happen to me or the evidence, it's well documented. Again, my name is Mitchell. It's M-I-T-C-H-E-A-L. Last name's Sellen, S as in Sam, E-L-L-E-N. So it started off in 2007 when the mother of my children was hitting herself in the stomach to the degree that it was throwing up red flags. I was wondering what in the heck is going on, and I asked her why she was doing it, and she said because she was having pains in her stomach. She was hitting with such a force that it wasn't explainable to me, so I recommended that we go to the hospital. And while in the hospital, the doctor asked me if she was pregnant, and I said absolutely not. If she was pregnant, she would have told me. In fact, doctor came back in the room then and advised us that in fact she was pregnant, and then she became very upset and agitated. I didn't say anything more until we left the hospital, at which time I asked her why she was hitting her stomach. She stated, "You know why, because I never wanted children." At that point, red flags come up all over. I didn't understand that she didn't want children, and that should have been addressed earlier, obviously. Nevertheless, between around the 5th month to the 8th month of her pregnancy, some events took place. Like, for example, she tried to cut herself with butter knives. She grabbed my gun from the bedroom, held it to herself in such a fashion it looked obvious that she was attempting to shoot herself. Then she was in the vehicle with me driving. I was driving in the vehicle, and she was in the passenger seat when we were driving down the road 6200 south and approximately 5600 west. We were going eastbound on 6200 south, where in fact she opened the door and then proceeded out the door, and I had to reach over and grab the back of her clothes and yank her back in the car and pull the car over. I asked her to never do that again, and stated that I am not good with people with head problems. Later on, when my son was born, she had been showing signs of just being irritable, irritated for no reasons. She was just constantly mad. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I'm just here to state the facts. I'm not a doctor to try to explain why it is. She seemed to be mad at everything, anything and everything, all the time. When my son was 5 months old, I came home from work, and I was in the garage, and I was down there in the garage for like 20 minutes, and I heard my son just crying and crying, and it didn't make any sense to me what was going on. I went upstairs and I said, "Why are you not feeding him? He's hungry." And she replied with anger and seemed to be frustrated again about something. Just did not want to breastfeed him at all. didn't want to deal with him. So she went over and she took her hand, grabbed him, his clothes by the chest, and yanked him up, shoved him against her breast, and then took the palm of her hand and smashed his head into her breast so hard that he couldn't breathe. At that point, I yelled at her and I said, "He can't freaking breathe." And so then she took him and threw him 3 or 4 feet into the crib like a sack of potatoes. I went over and I picked him up, put him on my left shoulder, and that's when she came to me and she punched me on the left side of my face, which left a red mark. And she was about 1 inch away from hitting him in the head with her fist. So at that point, I put my hand up to keep her back from being able to hit me or my son. And then she, as I put my hand up, then she stepped on a shoe going backwards as she was backing up. She stepped on a shoe, twisted her ankle sideways, and dropped to the ground. She says, "Oh, I can just tell the police you pushed me down." I told her, I said, "I don't care what you say. Do what you wish." And so then we were issued, when the police came, I showed the police my face was red, that she had hit me. She admitted to the police that she hit me. In the police report, it indicates that, and that she admitted also being the aggressor in the case. The police insisted on writing me a ticket, even though I didn't do anything to her and didn't touch her, other than to defend myself and prevent myself from being hit or my child from being hit. So this was then brought up to court, but on that day, the police allowed her to leave with my son, which was completely out of question and unacceptable. They also wrote me a ticket, a simultaneous ticket, which was unacceptable. The police here in Utah are so programmed to protect women. It's women 90%, men 10%, which is discriminatory and bias. As far as I thought, we were a country that was supposed to be universally non-biased when it comes to the laws, especially. So, and definitely non-discriminatory. But nevertheless, it took me a few days, and I obtained my son back via a warrant and a protective order. The mother had been remanded to supervised visitation via paternity test. I was granted temporary custody or custody of my son during that time. The Taylorsville, Utah court, the judge was Hispanic and favoring the mother. Incredibly, that was obvious to see later on. The fact that the prosecutor came with a suggestion stating that if we were to get married, because we were not married at the time, if we were to get married, somehow that would resolve the domestic violence issue. And only did I learn later that it was really just a tactic to benefit the mother. Because getting married due to a domestic violence issue doesn't solve domestic violence. Matter of fact, just seems to promote more. Nevertheless, time goes on. It was about, I raised my son myself for about 6 months until the marriage came forced out of Taylorsville, and then we rehomed together, and then conceived my daughter, which it seems like they suggest, they as in people that hear about this case somehow suggest that because I had another child with her, that somehow that was my fault, everything that has happened in the past and in the future. I've made no argument about the fact that I've wanted children for 22 years. I've done everything to be able to obtain children of my own. Been through several marriages where I wasn't able to have children for whatever reason. But my life goal ever since I was 18 was to have children of my own. I adore my children to no end. Love them more than life itself. So I won't get emotional here, so I need to continue on. After that, my daughter was conceived. There was a period of time that she seemed to calm down. She has a time, usually, a year, time can go by like 10 months or something before another serious episode happens. And then, but then when it does happen, it's very serious in nature. So anyway, time goes along, and in approximately 2012, I walked in on her coming from 150 feet or so from outside after hearing my daughter was screaming and crying and drowning, couldn't breathe. And so I proceeded into the bathroom from out there with the horses and flopped the shower curtain door open and noticed that she had been holding, at that time she was holding my daughter under the water. I grabbed my daughter from her hands and I said, "What are you doing?" She says she wouldn't stop crying. At that time I told her, I said, "Get your stuff and get out." And I told her to pack her stuff up, and I called the bishop of the church and then asked him for some assistance to get her transported to the Greyhound station to be brought back to her family's house in Salt Lake. So she was then put onto the bus by myself. I took her myself. They were not able to get there promptly, so brought her in there, and then she was put onto the bus and she left. 5 days later, she came back, and the missionaries called me and told me, "Mitchell, get her out, get those kids out of the house. She's on her way back. She just called us for a ride." Missionaries Skinner and so forth. I had met the missionaries down at the store, and then proceeded to call the police because I didn't know what to do. Missionaries were witness to that, and witness to what was going on in the passage. I had revealed a lot of information to them, so they understood the natural concern that I had as a parent and the willingness to protect my children. So she ended up coming back. The police refused to do anything. They absolutely said, "You're still married to her, and there's clothes in your house. Her clothes are in your house, so we cannot do anything." So she came back, and I told her, I said, "If you ever hurt my children again, we're done forever, and that's it. I'm never gonna take her back." And then things calmed down for a little bit again. So at this point, I turned around and sold the house there shortly after. And in the next section, I will tell you about the rest of the story. Again, my name is Mitchell Sellon, and I appreciate you watching. If you're a single father, do whatever you can to protect your children. Children do not deserve to be abused by any adult, let alone have any kind of acceptance or acceptability for a woman hurting her children. It's unacceptable. So if you're a single father or a father of children, do whatever you can to protect your children. Thanks.